Okay, Jai Hind, all of you. I am Dr. Aditya Pratap Singh, Associate Professor in Department of IT, and we are going to discuss programming for problem solving subject that is basically based on C programming language. The code for this subject is KCS 101T, and in second semester it is KCS 201T. So this is the syllabus which we follow as per the AKTU University, and this subject has, here it is having 3 lectures, 50 evaluation scheme, and total credits are. So we are going to discuss the beginning or basics of digital computers. So in this we will start with the introduction of computer system, and we will try to cover what is digital computer, what is basic evolution of computers, memory, its components like memory, processor, IO devices, storage. So these concepts we will cover in today's lecture. These are the some books which are recommended by university that you can follow. So in the beginning we start with the computer. So a computer is basically a electronic device which receives input from the user, stores and processes those input as per the given instructions, and provides the desired output or output in the desired format. So this is the basic job of computer, but it is how much it is looking simple in this definition is not that simple, because lots of work is being done during this process part. So input is whatever it receives from the user, and the processing part is done by the computer. This input data, whatever we have given, this input data is processed by a well defined set of instructions within a particular sequence, which are written by the programmer. So they needs a programming language, and the output is made available from the processing steps and output to the user. Whatever format user requires, the output is given in that format. Like if I want to click on change background and the background changes, so that is the desired output of my input. What input I have given? I have given a click on change background button. So this, after that input, lots of processing has been done sorry, to provide the desired output. As far as the definition is concerned, a computer is controlled by internally stored programs, and it is capable of using common storage for all or part of a program, and also for all or part of data, program as well as data necessary for the execution of the program, because execution of program requires some data to which it can perform operations, and executing user written or user designated programs, performing user designated manipulation of digital represented discrete data including arithmetic operations and logic operations, and executing programs and modify themselves during their execution. So this complex definition is given by or standardized by ISO, in the International Standards Organization, and I hope you all have seen the digital computer. Everybody knows that this is a digital computer, and this is called CPU, and this is the display device. This is input, keyboard, mouse. So this all have been using. There are some other computers which like this is a desktop, this is a laptop, and this is a tab, or the smartphones which we uses are also a kind of computer. Xbox, gaming consoles, they also perform lots of processing to let us play the games. So, they are also digital computers. Some other computer types which we generally do not see in our daily life, like this is itself a computer. Generally, these servers, web servers are of this kind, and they are put in a rack, and they are generally have a very high configuration. So, these are another example of like a data center which performs very high transaction processing per second. So, there are many different, like nowadays almost every car has a computer inbuilt in it, and lots of sensors are there which provides lots of signals to the computer. On the basis of that signals, the car takes decision, or the computer inbuilt in that car takes decision. Like if it detects an impact in the front side, and it's up to threshold, then the airbags blown up, airbags opened. So, this kind of work is done in cars. So, it is also having a computer, and data centers are there. Mainframes or very high processing computers are also there for performing different kind of tasks in companies. Even smart TVs are also a kind of computer. They have Android operating system nowadays, and perform different apps can be installed in these TVs, and they can work like mobile phone, smartphone. So, these computers consists of mainly two, if we broadly distinguish, then there are two components, hardware and software. So, hardware are basically the parts which are visible to us. They include like the CPU related microchips, motherboard, ports, different ports like USB port, CD, DVD ports. So, these are hardware parts which are physically visible to us, like keyboards, mouse, monitors. So, these all are hardware. Another component is software. Software is basically the information that computer uses to get the job done, and this computer allows user to complete tasks, or let the hardware complete the task based on the software instructions. So, there are different kind of softwares for different type of task, like operating systems, DOS, Windows, Unix, Linux, Mac. So, these operating systems are there to facilitate to take task from that hardware. And there are some softwares which are created for specific job, like Microsoft Excel is there for having data kind of tasks. Microsoft Word is there for writing some text, letters, drafting these. Some graphics programs like Adobe Paint is there, so like my MS Paint is there for some graphics related, picture related task. And so, there are different kind of browsers which are used to surf internet. Adobe PDF Reader is there for reading PDF files, and different many softwares are available, like Adobe Illustrator for graphic related jobs. So, now types of computers. So, depending on the job and its performance, the computers are divided into different types. Like on top, supercomputers are there which are most powerful, and they are generally used for scientific purpose, like for weather forecasting, and for different kind of decision expert systems. So they uses some supercomputers for performing scientific task which requires very high complex calculations with a very small span of time. After that, some mainframe or mini computers are there, which are generally used by business organizations, governments, for e-governance, for organizations like e-commerce sites. So they use these mainframes or mini computers at backend, where they perform a very high transaction processing at a very high rate. And some personal computers are there, which are smaller and less powerful, which we generally use for our day-to-day task. The computers are evolved it has from way back in the 1940s. So at that time, the computers was very very large machine. The evolution of computer is very interestingly described by a Hollywood movie, The Imitation Game. That is a very good movie, which where you can see these computers are evolving. They used vacuum tubes. They were very expensive, and they consume lot of power with limited performance. They were using magnetic tapes, magnetic drums, so their size were very big. Some of the beginning computers like UNIVAC, AKGEC, these were some computers in the beginning. Next is the second generation computers, which the generation is we can say started from 1950s up to 1960s. And the transistors has taken place of vacuum tubes. So these transistors size is very small in comparison to vacuum tubes, and that this has reduced the overall size of the computer. So they become smaller, they become faster, and they also started using magnetic discs, which are smaller in size and having more memory also. So these like some high level languages like Fortran, COBOL, they were started using within the they have started, some compilers were developed. That means high level languages, because in the beginning, in the first generation computer, only the machine level, like 0101, the instructions were written in the 01 format, and that was not easy to program something onto the computer. But with the beginning of these high level languages, it becomes easy. Then in the third generation from 1960 to 70s, the transistors has also replaced with ICs. ICs stands for integrated circuit, that they are having a very complex circuit integrated on a board. So these chips are being used in place of transistors. So they also reduce the size of third generation computers, and they become more faster and accurate than second generation computers. So in the memory part, some changes has also taken place, like magnetic core memories were being started using, and this like semiconductor memories, RAM, ROM, these are being used. Some microprogramming is also introduced, and a high level language like Fortran, NCC, COBOL, these are being used. So they have started a new era where the programs are more frequently and in less efforts are being written and be used on computers. So in the third generation, cache memory and virtual memories are also introduced to improve the performance of the computer. Operating systems were introduced for efficiently using the hardware and sharing of computer system by several users. Everybody can use their own operating systems. Some parallel processing has also been introduced to improve the performance, like there are operating system with multi-programming, multi-user system, time-shared system were started using. At that time, some popular computers like VAX 750, IBM ICL 900, System 360 mainframe from IBM has started evolving. ICs are very small electronic device used with semiconductor material, and this has changed the complete scenario of the computing, and it has drastically reduced the size and also improved the performance of the computer. And from 1970 onwards, some microprocessors are also are started using instead of ICs, and they are very smaller in size, cheaper, faster, easy to handle, and all the present systems which we are using are in this category. All are using microprocessors. So VLSI has been introduced, very large scale integration, that means 10,000s of transistors can be placed in a single chip. So that's why the size has been reduced drastically. Nowadays you can see how thin laptops are available. CRT screens, laser and inkjet printers, scanners were also developed. Memory is also changed. Semiconductor memory chips, DRAM, is being used as main memory. Secondary memory composed of hard disk, floppy disk, magnetic tapes were used for backup. So this is the era which is a transition between 4th and 5th generation. In other systems like parallelism, pipelining, cache memory and virtual memory were also applied for enhancing the performance. Large area network, wide area network systems were developed where desktop workstations were interconnected with one another to share the memory requirement, to share the processing power. And some language like C language introduced on Unix OS. GUI interface is also created, because in the beginning computers were used like we use in our command prompt, black screen with some white text. That kind of work initially was done, but here in this 4th era, GUI has been introduced, which you see on Windows machines, Linux machines, Mac OS. So these are using very power consumption has been reduced. That's why our laptops can work for several hours without any power, continuous power source based on batteries. We can use our laptop for multiple hours. The performance has been increased, cost has been decreased, and they become very compact. In 1981, IBM introduced its first computer for the home user. That means the starting of personal computer era. And in 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh system. Now, if we talk about 5th generation computer, 5th generation computers are basically the computers of 4th generation with some extended intelligence in it. So that intelligence, like artificial intelligence, has been introduced, and the programs based on AI are being implemented on these machines, and some changes are being done based on that the requirement. So these system will be basically able to think and take decisions. They are used in areas like robotics, designing, defenses. These are the areas where these intelligent systems are being used. Some object-oriented languages like Java, suitable for internet programming, has been developed. Portable notebook computers were introduced. Like you can see, our mobile systems are now very efficient and are running multiple kinds of programs. Some programs which are AI enabled are also being executed by our smartphones. So like these operating system came, many systems have been developed for catering or for giving platform to this intelligent computing. Now let's about the basic component setup of a computer, that we can say the block diagram of a computer. So in a general computer, every computer has some input unit from where it can receive input, and output unit from where it gives the desired output. This input is generally given by user in the form of actions or data, and output is given by some changes or as a information. So this digital computer basically has two parts. One is the storage unit. This storage unit has two different things. One is primary storage and another is secondary storage. The primary storage is called primary because it can only be directly accessed by the CPU or the processor. The processing part is basically having two things. One is control unit and another is ALU, arithmetic logic unit. So these units are performing processing, and this processor can only be accessed by this primary memory. Primary memory is being accessed by processor only. So that's why it is called primary memory is being accessed by processor directly. The secondary memory is, whenever used, it sends its data is copied into primary memory and then accessed by the processor. So here these computer provides the physical mechanism, like it processes, it stores, and it performs input and output. So the software provides instructions to tell the hardware. Hardware is being instructed by software what task to perform, and it includes operating system like Windows, Linux, and some applications programs like MS Word, MS Paint. And the data in the computer may be representing numbers, characters, graphics, but it is always kept in the form of hardware and software that can manipulate. In memory, there are different kind of memories now available. So these memories, as I have already told, the memory which is directly accessible to the processor is called primary. The memory which is not directly accessible, that is called the secondary memory. Primary contains ROM and RAM. RAM stands for random access memory, ROM stands for read-only memory. ROM has three different kind of programmable ROM, erasable programmable ROM, and electrically erasable programmable ROM. Programmable ROM means it is programmed when it is manufactured. Erasable programming ROM means it contains the instruction and which can be changed also. That is done with the help of laser. But electrically erasable programming ROM is also available, which whose content can be changed using electricity, some volts. And there is a RAM. RAM is also a primary memory. There is a static RAM and dynamic RAM which is being used. RAM is basically used to keep the instructions ready which are being executed by the processor. ROM contains the instruction which are initially needed whenever the program gets booted, whenever the system gets booted. Like the operating system resides in the secondary memory which is not directly accessible. So the processor cannot access this secondary memory directly. Instead, what it do? It uses the content of ROM, and ROM's instructions are used to perform a check of peripheral devices and then load the initial functions of operating system, and those initial functions then takes control and start loading the operating system from secondary memory. Secondary memory is a memory which is a permanent memory. That means, like RAM is a volatile memory. That means whenever there is no power, its bits will be set. So they all will become 0. But ROM is a non-volatile which keeps data that it uses BIOS. So this BIOS is basically containing some basic input output system which contains some programs, to very small programs to check peripheral and load the initial part of operating system. RAM is a volatile memory. That means it is not sustaining its data after electricity. When there is no electricity, there is no data. And in case of secondary memory, it is also non-volatile. That means it contains the data whenever there is no electricity also. So secondary memory, we keep all the data like our important files, our employees data, our payroll data, our softwares. So everything we keep in secondary memory. So that is available in the form of hard disk, floppy disk, DVDs, flash drives or pen drives. So the purpose of memory is basically data storage. So in primary memories, we store the data or instructions during processing, which are directly accessible to CPU. So it is of limited capacity and volatile. किसकी बात कर रहे हैं? We are talking about RAM. And secondary memory, this is a permanent long-term storage where the secondary refers to the inability of CPU to access it directly. So data is secondary, in secondary memory is generally organized in the form of files. So these are hard disk, high capacity and non-volatile memory. Random access memory, which we have already discussed, it is a volatile. That means it's lost its state or reset whenever the power is removed. It is used to hold application programs from input devices or storage. Read-only memory, it holds the bootstrap loader or BIOS part of the operating system, and it retains data when the computer is switched off because it is non-volatile. The cache memory concept is introduced to improve the performance. So cache memory is basically faster and expensive than RAM. So it improves the performance of computer, and a very small part of cache memory is already built into CPU along with the CPU. It is integrated along with the CPU to keep very frequent data within the CPU only, so that there will not be any latency or delay in accessing the data. There is another level of cache that is called L2 cache. It is also a static RAM. It is placed between the RAM and CPU. It is placed between RAM and CPU, so it also keeps frequent data other than which is available in L1 cache. So once the data is required or instruction is required, it is searched in L1, then it is searched in L2, and then it is searched in RAM. Sometimes another label L3 is also introduced in between L2 and RAM. So this is a memory hierarchy triangle. In the top, the fastest memory available, but it is fastest, costliest, but it is generally kept short in storage capacity, less storage capacity. So if we see memories from bottom to top, then these devices are smaller. That means the larger and the size is being reduced, faster, so they are becoming faster and costlier also. So top is having registers, CPU registers, which are inside the CPU only. So they are the fastest. and they holds the data retrieved from cache memory. Then we have L1 cache, which is also integrated along with the processor. So it holds the lines retrieved from L2 cache. L2 cache is placed between the RAM and CPU. So it holds the cache lines retrieved from L3 cache. L3 cache is placed between L2 cache and RAM. Then main memory is dynamic RAM. So it holds the data which is coming from secondary storage. So this, then local secondary storage, that means the hard disk which we have in our computer, inbuilt local disks. So that data is kept. You can easily say that hard disks we have like 1 TB, 2 TB hard disks attached in our computer, whereas RAM we have 4 GB, 6 GB, 16 GB, 32 GB. So that is the difference you can understand. There is a huge difference between in the cost also. Like cache memories are costlier than RAM, and RAM is costlier than this. And another secondary storage, that is remote secondary storage. We can have data on cloud, we can have distributed file system, we can have data on web servers, so which will be fetched. So it will take more time. So it can be counted slower, but it may be very high storage. So if we see from top to bottom, the size is more, speed is low, and the cost is also becoming less. These are some books which you can refer for this basic concept, like Computer Basics and C Programming by Rajaraman, and the Computer Concepts and Programming in C, Computer Fundamentals and Programming in C by Rima Thareja. So these books you can refer for basics of digital computer, and we will cover the operating system part in the next lecture. Thank you. Jai Hind all.